You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show here, and we're having some technical problems, so bear with us a little bit. Apparently, there are thunderstorms over RBN, and Skype keeps dropping out, so we're going to try and stay connected as well as we possibly can. It is Tuesday, May 9th, 2017, and we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and getting into the news here. Over in Syria, it looks like something is getting ready to happen there, and of course it's going to be telegraphed with yet another in a long series of false flags being manufactured to convince you that we have the moral right and the necessity and the duty to go and smash up somebody else's country yet again. The de-escalation agreement for the 4 fighting zones in Syria has come into effect, and so far it does seem to be working. The battles between Syrian government forces and foreign-supported rebels have slowed down in the north, and apparently the only fighting going on right now is in the Daraa Governorate, where apparently ISIS is infighting with other rebel groups, and they're fighting amongst themselves trying to eliminate each other, which might not be a bad thing for the people of Syria. Now, the government of Syria has rejected any international forces in the safe zones. That includes Russia, that includes the United States of America, it includes Britain, which seems like a good way to calm things down in those safe zones. A good way to keep them safe is to not let the machinery of death go on in there. Unfortunately, the stickler in that continues to be the United States of America, who says, we will fly wherever we want to fly in Syria. We're the United States. We will go bomb anybody we want to. And this is coming out of the Pentagon, not the White House. And that, I think, is beginning to reveal that the executive branch really has lost control of the military foreign policy. And so they're out there with the Pentagon spokesman saying, we'll go wherever we please, and nobody can stop us. Sounds like famous last words. Now, photos have surfaced on the net suggesting that advanced U.S. weaponry is in the hands of the Syrian Kurdish forces. This is coming out of the Military Times. And they're talking about these forces seem to possess sophisticated American combat equipment, weaponry the Pentagon says it doesn't provide to the Syrian Kurdish fighters. Well, by golly, they got it somehow. But photos are showing that the Syrian forces' gear now includes clothing, weapons, and enhancements once issued to U.S. Marine Corps Special Operations personnel and used by foreign commandos as they train. This is high-end stuff. This is even better than what the normal rank-and-file soldiers will get. Well, whether or not it's covert, clandestine, or just stolen, it doesn't matter anymore, because according to a story out of Zero Hedge, Trump has now approved a plan to directly arm the Kurds. And this, of course, we're sending more weapons into another war zone. Just get them all geared up, ready to kill each other. It is a mess. It is really, really a mess. And for those of you who, like me, are pro-peace and were really thinking that a Donald Trump victory was going to reverse this militarist course of the United States government, you have to be just as disappointed as I am. And I am very, very disappointed. Now, a lot of people starting to speculate about the U.S. preparing a ground invasion of Syria. Drones have spotted hundreds of U.S. and Jordanian armored vehicles at the border. And now that the secret is pretty much out, Fars News is saying U.S., British, and Jordanian forces are readying for a joint operation in Syria. And they're saying it's an invasion of Syria under the pretext of the war on the ISIL terrorists. So all we need now is the false flag that we have already heard is being lavishly produced, and they're going to go to war in Syria again. Now, interestingly enough, the commander of Iran's volunteer force, Brigadier General Gholam Hossein Ghaib Parvar, is basically saying Israel is orchestrating the terrorist events in Syria with the help of certain regional rulers and Takfiri militants. Everybody wants to play in Syria. Syria's become the new sandbox for all the children to play in. a very dangerous situation. Apparently, Donald Trump's advisors are proposing a plan to change the U.S. strategy up in Afghanistan. And basically, you don't need me to tell you this. It's to expand the military activities against militants and anybody else in Afghanistan who thinks that Afghanistan should be run by and for the Afghani people. All right, we're going to do a little shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining our network. And this is a good time for us to remind everybody that RBN is in the middle of their annual May fundraising drive. And folks, it is really, really serious. And imagine a world without RBN. That's how critical it is right now. And for more information about how to donate, go to the front page of republicbroadcasting.org. There's a PayPal link, there's a postal address, there's a toll-free number that you can call on in. But we're all of us in the Truth Movement, we're stretched to the absolute breaking point. And none of us got in here with the expectations that we're ever going to be rich. But we got in here with the expectation we could stop the war. That hasn't worked on out. But we're all struggling and suffering, and the independent media is under constant attack by the corporations, the corporate media, various governments. And we're fighting for our survival. So anything that you can pitch on in, really, we do need your help. It is that serious. So getting on back to the multiple wars. Apparently, Benjamin Netanyahu is very unhappy with the coverage of the Hamas charter by the CNN, New York Times, and he's out there saying they're the fake news. He's now out there standing alongside Donald Trump saying CNN and the New York Times, it's all fake news talking about the Hamas charter. Pay no attention. And I think we have come up with a real definition of what constitutes fake news, and that is any news that anybody in a position of power doesn't like. By default, oh, it must be fake news. Now, interestingly, over at an organization called IRMEP, their director, Grant Smith, has filed an emergency motion asking the U.S. Court of Appeals for an injunction on the imminent transfer of U.S. foreign military assistance to Israel. Now, back on the 5th, Trump signed into law a temporary spending measure designed to keep the U.S. government running until September. This law included $3.7 billion in foreign aid to Israel. No money for the border, no money for hungry children in our country, but $3.7 billion in foreign aid to Israel. Now, the appellants in the case are saying what I've been saying all along. Israel's nuclear weapons program makes it illegal for the U.S. government to send them any of your money as long as they refuse to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty or implement the procedures under the Arms Export Control Act or allow IAEA inspections. And they're saying no president, including Trump, has issued the required special waivers because to do so would be to admit that the U.S. government knows Israel has nuclear weapons. They're in a bit of a corner on this one. And this lawsuit makes special mention of the Symington Amendment to the Foreign Appropriations Act and the Glenn Act. And it will be interesting to see what the courts decide to do. I mean, obviously the courts decided they could overrule Donald Trump on issues of immigration law. Wouldn't it be interesting to see if a court would overrule this giving of your money to Israel? All right, let me get something copied and pasted here. I'll get that later. Now then, moving on here. Over in North Korea, a little bit of good news. Moon Jae-in won the election in South Korea, and apparently won by quite a wide margin. It brings South Korea to the end of nearly a decade of conservative rule. Moon Jae-in is a liberal, and Moon Jae-in has promised that he's going to ask the U.S. to get out of South Korea. South Korea can take care of their own defenses. And he wants to throw cold water on this foolishness of a new Korean war or extending the existing Korean war. He wants to reach his hand across the DMZ to Kim Jong-un and say, let us tone this down because all we're doing is giving the U.S. an excuse to come on in here and take over another country. And I think Kim Jong-un is going to reach back and say, yeah, let's tone this down. Let's be friends. It was only 6 years ago they were talking about reunification until the United States got in there and started mucking about. But this is going to be very, very interesting. It certainly yanks the rug out from underneath this idea of we have to go into North Korea. Maybe that's why they're pivoting back to Syria. Oh, we can't make any progress on Korea. Let's go back to Syria. We're not making progress in Syria. Well, let's go back to Afghanistan. Here a war, there a war, everywhere a war, E-I-E-I-O. Oh, what fun it is to be a military general. Now, there's an article over at Blacklisted News saying that Washington's real motives in North Korea, and for that matter Afghanistan, are psychology, maintaining the myth of America's military might, geopolitics, control of strategic areas, rare earth metals, which are already coming into shortage, and modern electronics depend on those rare earth metals, and of course, left unsaid in this article, opium. Because Afghanistan and North Korea are major opium producers. Now, the Afghan opium is already under the control of the U.S. government. North Korea is not. In fact, it represents a competition, a competing product line, which drives prices down, and the American drug lords absolutely do not like that. Now, there's been a little bit of a whoopsie in this training exercise off the coast of South Korea. The USS Lake Champlain Ticonderoga-class cruiser has collided with a South Korean fishing vessel. And they're still investigating to find out what happened, where apparently with all of this high-tech equipment and we're looking for incoming North Korean missiles, they completely missed this fishing boat was right there, and the Ticonderoga just slammed into it. They have a bad habit of doing that. I remember when the Greenville, the USS Greenville, accidentally hit and sank that Japanese fishing training vessel with all those young men on board, and a lot of them died. And I had actually seen them down at the Aloha Tower because those training boats had put in there so the kids could get off and do some souvenir shopping. And we had seen that ship just a couple of days before it happened. So you have to wonder, how does one of the United States' supposed top-end warships completely miss and then run into a South Korean fishing boat? There's something not working there. Now, again, getting on back to North Korea and the nuclear threat, there's an interesting article over at the original antiwar.com, where it says the U.S. is saying yes to nuke tests by itself, but not by North Korea, because twice in the last week the United States shot nuclear-capable long-range missiles toward the Marshall Islands. But the U.S. has refused to join negotiations for a new treaty banning nuclear weapons. And again, we're seeing this double standard, this hypocrisy. Our nuclear weapons and missiles are good, and your nuclear missiles and weapons are bad. We seek nuclear disarmament of every country we plan on invading somewhere down the road. So, all this posturing about world peace and nuclear-free world, that's what the U.S. wants, but only for the other countries. Now, interestingly enough, as you know, down in Venezuela, they are in intense turmoil down there. In fact, things are now so bad, the military, which have been trying to protect the government from the people, they're now switching sides. They're marching with the protesters. Those people are starving to death because of economic warfare that's been waged against Venezuela for decades, and now it's reached a crisis point. So imagine our surprise that the United States is planning military drills near Venezuela. And in this article that came out of Blacklisted News, it says it raises concerns over potential ulterior motives on the part of the United States. No kidding. Venezuela is a major oil producer. The reason the United States has been trying to change the government of Venezuela all this time is because Venezuela has a bad habit of selling their oil for currencies other than the U.S. dollar. They've been selling their oil to China for the yuan for years. That's why they tried a coup d'etat against Hugo Chavez, which didn't work. And now they've clearly destabilized the country to the point of collapse, and all of a sudden the military shows up. Oh, it's a humanitarian intervention. We have to go in and calm things down, and establish an approved government that will sell Venezuela's oil for the U.S. dollar, the recognized superior currency of the globe, the U.S. dollar. Now, remember the hacktivist group Anonymous? They've released a new video. And, okay, there we are. I'm sorry, I signed up for Social Security, Medicare just before the show began, and all of a sudden they're popping things up here. You must do this, you must do that. So I apologize for that. Anyway, Anonymous has a new video, and in this case, it doesn't have much in the way of revealing or leaked information. They're out there literally warning it is time to prepare for World War III, which we didn't need Anonymous to tell us that, but it sort of underscores that pretty much everybody is finally accepting that this is what has happened, that we are on the edge of World War III. Despite all of our best efforts to derail it and head it off, we are there. And when you look at how terribly the already in existence wars have been going, the U.S. government is stuck in these quagmires all over the Middle East, all over the world. It supports my contention that if we get into a real shooting war with Russia and China, the United States will not be able to prevail. And that will mean nuclear exchange at some point. And for those of us out here in the middle of the Pacific, within striking range of Russian, Chinese, and potentially North Korean missiles, it's one of the things that's keeping us up at night. Now, turning to domestic politics, the corporate media has been rerunning all these clips out of the hearings at the Senate into Russian interference in the election, where basically everybody says it's Russian interference. Do you have any proof? No, we don't have any proof, but it just makes sense they were doing it. And they're just selling that as hard as they can. They're selling that idea. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I was just going to call up and talk a little bit about the Kurds, if you'd like. The reason why the Kurds are the linchpin here, they straddle what is now Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Turkey. And the part of Iraq they have is the northern Mosul is in basically a Kurd area, is very rich in oil. All right, so
yes,
we can partition Iraq and get oil by backing them. We can keep Turkey in our orbit by allowing them to either get the Kurds out of their area and into a dismembered Syria and a dismembered Iran as well, because by arming the Kurds, and by the way, the reason why they have those arms are because they would be resisting the Iranians or fighting the Iranians. So it dismembers Syria for Israel. Mm-hmm. It also helps us with dismember Iran for Israel. We're in a large part of the reason why we're in Afghanistan still is because
I'm going to have to put you on hold, Peter. Peter, I'm going to have to put you on hold. We got to do a commercial break. Don't go away. We're going to come right back to this after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Peter in Los Angeles. And Peter, can you just sort of pick up where you left off with all the various interests that have an advantage to seeing turmoil in Syria?
Well, the biggest interest is Israel, of course. They get to see and have seen and are seeing Iraq dismembered, with Kurds getting northern oil-rich Mosul area. The Kurds also would be moving into Syria. It allows Israel to get the Golan, because we have a dismembered, no longer existing Syria. Israel will get the Golan and their oil. The reason why we're still in, one of the reasons we're still in Afghanistan is that it forces the Iranians to defend against our special ops incursions from that whole Iranian-Afghan border, and it allows us to also be able to destabilize the Caucasus if necessary. So the Kurds are central to this.
Yes.
It keeps Turkey in our orbit, and it's central to what Israel wants to do. And by the way, I'm sure that a lot of those armored vehicles that are in Jordan came from those arms pre-positioned sets of equipment we had in Israel, so that they don't have to do it, but we can, right? We can again fight their war if we invade from Jordan again, and they can just occupy the Golan forever and get the oil. We get nothing except the invasion.
Well, it's more than just occupation. Israel is already out there making noises that the Golan has always been a traditional part of Israel and inseparable, and they basically want to redraw their border where the Golan is now actually a part of Israel permanently. The wild card in all of this, of course, is that as the U.S. starts arming up the Kurds, Erdogan in Turkey is not going to be liking that at all, and he was already talking about sending his troops down into the Kurdish areas to actually make war on the Kurds. So this could actually bring the United States and Turkey into conflict.
Well, my theory on that, Mike, is that if there's a dismembered Syria and a dismembered Iraq and a dismembered Iran, they could have that land. They have no land that's autonomous themselves right now, and we could keep the Turks in our orbit if we could allow them to then push the Kurds into the areas that would then be autonomous Kurdistan.
Well, I understand that, but I think if there's an autonomous Kurdistan, Turkey may see it as a threat. I'm certain the Kurds will go into it of their own free will. They won't need to be pushed, but I think Turkey is going to see it as a threat. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, that may be, Mike, but it also may be solving their problem without having to do a replay of what they did to the Armenians. I don't know, but I think that it definitely serves Israel's interest. That's for sure. We've already taken out Iraq for them. We're taking out Syria for them. We're about to take out Iran for them.
Yes. And
the only way we can do that is to use the Kurds to do it all three areas.
Makes sense. It makes sense. But again, I foresee it turning into another quagmire, like the rest of all these U.S. misadventures all over the Middle East. We do a good start, and then it bogs down, and it just sits there, soaking up money and lives. Yeah, it is. It absolutely is.
Mike, can I say the other reason why I believe that we're in Afghanistan, not only for the oil pipelines and the opium trade, which I'm sure are a factor, but it keeps that whole line of supplying anybody who's against Iran, and they have to defend that border, the Afghan-Iranian border. It also, there's obviously an emerging Russia, China, Iran, even Pakistan axis.
Yes.
And it sits right in the way of the Chinese being able to directly resupply Iran and maybe having Chinese divisions on the Persian Gulf. That's my theory anyways.
I'm going to have to look at a map and think about that, but definitely we're seeing Russia and China draw closer together. Iran is certainly going into their sphere of influence. I don't know about Pakistan yet. I think they're still trying to figure out where their best options are lying. But yeah, let me look at a map and I'll think about that. Anyway, Peter, we got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to take another phone call. Steve in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Mike, I see the situation to play out just like it did in Iraq. Of course, false flags get us there, and of course we're going to grab their president, so Syrian Bashar al-Assad will be in our custody. A mock trial, a kangaroo court. Of course, he'll be executed for crimes against his people, which were never founded. I see this thing play out just the same way. It worked the first time. I see these people to do the same thing all over again.
Yeah, it is the same pattern. It's the same pattern that they've done time and time again.
Yep, exact same pattern. If it works the first time, they'll try it again a second time. Sad part
there is a problem with that. Is that they've played that same strategy so many times since the end of World War II. The world realizes what's going on. They're not being fooled by the propaganda anymore.
Right. Well, the world will know the truth. The American people are, for some reason, they're just not too bright. They don't get it, and this whole pattern is being played out the same way as it was in Iraq. And again, they'll target Syrian Bashar al-Assad. They'll execute him. He will never have his true date in court, and he'll be executed for a crime he never committed.
Yeah, just like they did with Saddam Hussein. Well, just because the government propagandists and the corporate media are still using the same script over and over and over again doesn't necessarily guarantee the American people are buying it. We seem to have reached a stage where the government is just going through the motions and they don't even care if anybody believes them or not anymore. And certainly looking at the latest polls, nobody is believing them. Trust and confidence in the corporate media is at a record low. Same thing with trust and confidence in the government, record low. They have a massive credibility problem of their own making. And their only answer is we're just going to keep on doing what we're doing because nobody out there is going to stand up and stop us.
Right. Hey, thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now, turning on back to all these investigations that are going on, we are actually starting to see some movement toward investigating what was going on in the Obama administration, especially with regards to that email server, which I think is a big, ugly cancer that everybody wants to get left alone. And they're starting to dance around the outside of it a bit with this Huma Abedin stuff. But what's really interesting, apparently top Justice Department officials are now basically pushing the FBI to start speeding things up. It's taking too long. Of course, we know that Director Comey is definitely on the side of Hillary Clinton and protecting that deep, dark secret of just what it was she was doing with that email server. Frankly, I think keeping Comey on was one of Trump's really big mistakes. But the Justice Department seems to be getting out the little whip, and they're cracking over the head and say, you got to start moving forward on this stuff. You know, and stop the departmental infighting, meaning over at the FBI, and get on with your job. Now, not too long ago, there was a story that came on out where there was a released email, which basically exposed the fact that Attorney General Loretta Lynch was, in effect, promising to protect Hillary Clinton from criminal charges. And basically they brought that up at the Senate hearing, and somehow or other, Director Comey was able to evade having to talk about that and steer it back to, we know Russia's attacking or hacking our elections and everything, which is what this hearing is all about. It's just a show trial to condemn Russia for something it did not do. But this information is coming out where obviously Hillary Clinton was being protected by the Attorney General and the head of the FBI. And remember, when Comey had that news conference where he said, we're not going to prosecute her, he went down the list of Title 18 felony violations she was guilty of, and then he let her skate on this excuse that they couldn't find any intention to do wrong. The same excuse he used when he admitted that Huma Abedin was sending classified documents from the secure servers to an outside laptop, the one belonging to her husband, Anthony Weiner. She didn't mean to do wrong. But again, if you read Title 18, it says allowing secure classified information to be exposed through negligence is a crime as well. Criminal intent, wrongdoing, intention to cause harm is not needed. And Comey is either ignorant of the law or he's just hoping you all are. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Bob in Las Vegas. Aloha, Bob. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Mike, you keep pointing to the fact that Comey references that there was no intent, no criminal intent. But I haven't watched any of these hearings because I don't want to see these crooks.
Yeah.
I don't want to see their faces. But do any of these Congress people or senators say, oh, no, Mr. Director, you're mistaken. that's not an issue, the matter of intent. Did they come back with that reply, or they just let him keep talking? And
yeah, they let him keep talking. They let him get away with it. But I'm looking at the actual section here, Title 18, Section 793, Paragraph F. And it says, whoever being entrusted with or having lawful possession or control of any document, writing, code book, signal book, sketch, photograph, photographic negative, blueprint, plan, map, model, instrument, appliance, note, or information relating to the national defense through gross negligence permits the same to be removed from its proper place of custody or delivered to anyone in violation of his trust or to be lost, stolen, abstracted, or destroyed, blah, 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 shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 10 years or both. That's the letter of the law right there. Intent to do wrong is not necessary. And you're absolutely right. Nobody in those hearings has ever stood up and corrected Comey on the letter of the law. So they're all hoping that you don't know what the law actually is, that you'll just take their word for it that, she didn't mean to do wrong, and therefore, we should let her go.
Right. Mike, I know you're discouraged, like all of us, with Trump, and I know you had spoken before he took office that once he came into contact, once he had to deal with Netanyahu on a day-to-day basis, that he would come around and become more independent of the Israeli lobby and the Israelis. But
I was wrong.
You were wrong on that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's obvious. I think it's obvious it's not going to change. Mike, finally, Brandon from San Francisco was saying that the people on the center, the right, need to align with the left against these wars. The problem with the left is they're not concerned about, they used to be, they're not concerned about issues of war and peace and the middle class and all these manufacturing jobs. They're just interested in identity politics. That's their main issue now.
Yeah.
You can't align with them on war and peace. They don't care. They're just interested in these identity politics, transgenders, whatever,
political
these
correctness
issues. Right.
Yeah.
That's it. Can't align with these people. They're not interested.
Well, you know what's going on here. The government is using the ultra-liberal left like rodeo clowns. They're trying to keep people distracted, that's where a lot of this nonsense is coming on in, because right now the U.S. government doesn't want the American people really thinking very closely about all of this escalation of wars all across the globe. Because, again, they don't really have the support of the American people for a new global war. And I think all of the, shall we call it the war porn that is all over cable TV right now about the dropping of the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and all this footage from World War II and everything, I think it's actually being counterproductive. Because people are looking at it and they're not seeing it as glorious and heroic and, gee, wouldn't it be fun? They're actually being made more aware of just how terrible a thing war is. And frankly, I've met like maybe one person here on Oahu outside the military who thinks, yeah, this is a really good idea. We should go forward and just bomb them all.
Oh, Mike, finally, do you think the election of Macron will actually hasten the collapse of the EU? I believe it will. I look at Hollande, his numbers are maybe 5%. I think Macron, being an investment banker, having not an ounce of nationalism in his bones, I think his presidency will be an even bigger disaster and will hasten the collapse of the EU project.
It could backflash, because one reason is they're already finding evidence of massive election fraud that took the election away from Marine Le Pen, and we're going to be covering that a little bit later in the show. But you could actually see the French people revolt against their government, and it's not like they haven't done it before. So yeah, and again, fraud that is this much in your face. It really is undermining this illusion all over the world that just because you have elections, it doesn't mean that you're actually able to change the policy of those in control.
Perhaps we should start investing in guillotines.
Absolutely. I made exactly the same comment.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Okay, well, thank you. We're going to let you go here. Let's see. Just a word. Everybody looks at the guillotine and the French Revolution, as the reign of terror, which was certainly the point of view of the nobility and the bankers. Most people forget that the guillotine was invented to be the most humane method of execution possible. It was very horrific in that it was chopping the head off the body, but the doctor who invented it said this is going to be the most painless way of executing somebody for what was available back then. So that's the origin of that. Unless you dull the blade, then it's a different story. Now then, getting on back to Director Comey. What's interesting is Comey's statements before the Senate directly contradict what Huma Abedin herself said last November. Comey was out there saying that there's no big deal. Huma Abedin was regularly sending these classified emails to Anthony Weiner's laptop so that they could be printed out and be made available to her to take to the State Department. Apparently, Comey thinks they don't actually have printers inside the State Department, inside the secure network, but that's what he said. But last November, Huma Abedin, through her lawyer, Karen Dunn, said she had no idea how those emails could have wound up on Anthony Weiner's laptop, and only learned about the emails being on the laptop through the news media. So, again, more lies exposed, and the corporate media will just pretend like nothing ever happened. Judicial Watch has now filed lawsuit for Sally Yates' emails while she was at the Justice Department. And Sally Yates is in the history books for having served as Attorney General for a mere 10 days. And now she's out there on the warpath trying to say that, oh yes, she warned Donald Trump about Michael Flynn's connections to Russia, which, by the way, the FBI has now said there was nothing going on there. They've looked into it. The conversations between Michael Flynn and the Russian ambassador were all about proper business, above board. There was nothing going on. And Sally Yates is still out there screaming, oh yes, I warned them that Flynn was a Russian plant. And there's something that you probably ought to keep in mind at this point. Every time, everybody who's out there saying Russia did this, Russia did that, Russia, it always comes up short. There's no proof of any of it. They're just trying to bring back McCarthyism, where all they have to do is say the word Russian, and the American people will obediently wet themselves and fling their money and their babies into the designated wars. And at the hearings, I mean, they're making all these grandiose claims like Russia tried to disrupt U.S. elections for years. They've been doing it all along. Okay? Why didn't you say anything before now? If at first you don't succeed, lie, lie again appears to be the motto of our politicians. And as the lies fail to find traction with the American people, they get more and more outrageous, trying to get into the big lie area where it's so shocking that you'll just believe it on instinct. And what's really interesting, getting into the fine details of the hearing, you have Senator John Neely, Kennedy, saying, can we agree the Russians attempted to influence the outcome of the election? And Clapper and Yates said, oh, yes. And Kennedy says, did they succeed? And Clapper says, well, we can't make that call, which is political speech for, no, we couldn't find any evidence. They basically said in all 50 states they found no actual evidence of influence on voter tallies by the Russians. Now, we know that a lot of voter fraud has been discovered in last year's elections, all of it favoring Hillary Clinton. So, Dianne Feinstein and Joe Manchin have now admitted on the corporate media there is, in fact, no evidence of a Trump-Russia collusion. They're still pushing the story saying, well, it just makes sense they'd be colluding. We don't have to prove it. I mean, it's just so obvious. Everybody should see it. Meanwhile, CrowdStrike, which was the so-called computer security firm that claimed Russia hacked the DNC servers and then hacked the election, apparently they're so little thought of in their own computer security industry, they got laughed off the stage at ThoughtCon. They're seen as a joke by real computer security experts. All right, we're going to start with Alex in Florida, and we're probably going to have to take you through the commercial break. Alex, what's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. One thing that I heard that is telling, which we've heard it before during the congressional hearings, but you never hear them demand that we want the server. The FBI should demand the server from the DNC. I mean, if this is a real legitimate case that we have here, how come the DNC can not give the FBI the server to show us the evidence?
Well, that's always been one of the real questions. I mean, when the DNC said, we're being hacked, the Russians are hacking us, and the FBI came on in and said, let's take a look and say, oh, no, we've got our own security people, CrowdStrike, you just take their word for it. And CrowdStrike has now turned out to be just a joke, and even CrowdStrike has now pulled back on the claim, saying that, yes, their methodology was flawed, and they don't really have any proof. It was just a giant bluff. Apparently, somewhere in Hillary Clinton's fevered brain was this idea that if they could build a credible case for Russian interference in the election, in the minds of the American people, that they could somehow reverse the results. And it didn't happen. And now they're stuck with this idea that Russia hacked the elections, and they can't back down and say, we were just lying and fooling you all. So now they're stuck with it. All right, we're going to have to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the telephones. Sherry in Fredericksburg, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Thank you, Mike. You know, years ago, not years ago, but back when Hillary got off because of extreme carelessness, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember listening to a show, I don't know which one it was, but an attorney called in, and he said extreme carelessness is actually a definition for gross negligence. But because those magic words, gross negligence, weren't said, that she got off. So is this just a play on words? In other words, it was gross negligence, but because he said extreme carelessness, the definition of it, then somehow that exonerated her?
Well, they used language that seemed as banal as possible. They chose carelessness over negligence because carelessness, we all make careless mistakes. And they were trying to basically, feel bad for Hillary. I mean, she made a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes. But again, under Title 18, making a mistake is the crime when you're dealing with classified documents. Now, many years ago, when I was still on good terms with the government, I briefly held a clearance, and I got the lecture on how to handle classified documents, and I took that all very seriously. And so there are rules, and if I had to sit through that lecture, then so did Hillary Clinton. She knew the rules. There was no way she didn't know the rules. And so this idea that we should forgive her mishandling of classified documents because it was merely negligent, the law specifically says negligent releasing of classified documents to where they should not be is in and of itself a crime. She could go to jail for 10 years on that if we had a fair and honest justice system.
Yeah, but they're synonymous. You know, this is the thing. It's like a trick.
Yeah,
it's synonymous.
It's a trick of language. They could either say gross negligence or carelessness. Carelessness has less emotional impact, and that's why they went through that.
Yeah, that's right. It was almost like we were tricked, but we weren't really tricked. So let's not be tricked. You know, if it's a definition for it, then it must mean it. But just because he didn't say those exact words with the gross in there, extreme carelessness is gross negligence. You know what I mean? According to this attorney. So that ought to come up somewhere. I mean, his choice of words were not accurate, but they meant the same thing as. You know, it's just kind of this gray area it irritates me.
Well, it does, but it really is a side issue because the bottom line is Comey's claiming that they're not going to prosecute because they couldn't find an intention to do wrong. It doesn't play. It's not the letter of the law. Revealing classified information through negligence is a crime in and of itself. And Hillary did that with releasing information onto her private server, and Huma Abedin did it sending documents to Anthony Weiner's laptop. And Comey is just out there. He's obviously trying to protect this. And again, if I'm correct as to what Hillary was really doing with that email server, then that is a scandal. Everybody wants to go away because a scandal on that scale, a Secretary of State selling secrets to foreign interests and using that charitable foundation to collect and launder the money, that's a scandal that delegitimizes the entire government, which it's already very close to anyway. All right, well, listen, Sherry, we got to let you go. We have to do a station identification, and then we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And speaking of the phones, we're going to go to Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha, Glenn. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. The world of French politics. I have to recommend that people take a few minutes to listen to Alan Sherman's old classic song, "You Went the Wrong Way, Old King Louie."
Oh, I love that one. I absolutely love that one.
Oh yeah, it's an absolute perennial favorite when it comes to French and their politics.
Yes.
You know, we're gonna take you and the Queen down to the guillotine and shorten you a little bit.
Yes. He did a lot of wonderful parody songs, and he had a good career. I think he did Camp Grenada or Granada.
Yeah, hello, Mother, hello, Father.
Yeah, and it was very fun. It was very creative stuff. I loved all of his work.
I actually called about the Kurds. You were talking about the high-tech weaponry being given to the Kurds. This is another classic example of equipping both sides, because I heard recently about a sale of F-35s to Turkey. So we're selling the F-35 Turkey to Turkey, which seems apropos.
Yes.
Given that they're both so highly dysfunctional, and it's weird because the Kurds. I mean, I don't know. For some reason, from what I've seen of the Kurds, I tend to find myself rooting for them a little bit. They're just all they want is their own.
I am too. But you know, let's back up here to this issue of the F-35. The F-35 does have a lot of problems, and the issue is whether it could go up against an equivalent warplane as made by China and Russia, in which case we would probably have some problems. But when you're talking about just strafing poorly armed people on the ground, I'm sure the F-35 is going to be a very effective platform.
Well, the whole thing about it is it's a fighter bomber. So with a fighter bomber, you sacrifice some of the air superiority capabilities of like a Raptor or an F-22, but in exchange for being able to carry more ordnance and get that in. So it's designed to be escorted, by the Raptors or some sort of air superiority fighters, and then fight its way out after it does its bombing runs. But it's the Israelis got some, the Turks have them. Why? And if they had taken the money from that one weapons platform project and put it into healthcare, we could all be sitting pretty with single payer, no problem. But they never seem to. You talk about the ships, those littoral combat ships, and all these dysfunctional weapon systems. If they'd have put that into healthcare.
Hello? Okay, I think we lost Glenn. Okay, all right. Well, let's go to Mark in North Carolina then. Mark, are you okay? We just lost our Skype connection again. In fact, I just gotten a message from the control room at RBN that they are under heavy storms, and they were concerned that possibly they might actually lose power. And so let's see if they're still actually there. There we go. There we go. All right.
That the real prize is going to end up being Syria. And it looks
okay, and we're back here. We got our connection back. Apparently, there's a lot of really rough weather over there. Is Mark in? Let's go to Mark in North Carolina. Mark, are you there?
We still have Glenn.
We still have Glenn?
I'm here, Mike.
Okay.
I'm here.
40 seconds, Glenn. We lost you there.
Okay, let's.
I don't know when you blipped out. Sorry.
Well, just back up over the last, 2 or 3 things that you said here.
Yeah, real quick. I said the Turkey had when they made their incursions into Syria was beating up on the Kurds, which they want to do. There had been talk about establishing a Kurdish homeland in northern Iraq. Now there's talk about balkanizing Syria and making a Kurdish homeland there. Seems to me the Kurds just want to, be able to establish some sort of homeland for themselves, and they are tenacious fighters. And I also said, I had said the other week I thought the North Korean thing was sort of a head fake, and that the real prize was Syria. And with all this staging of the tanks and stuff along the Jordanian border, it still seems that a big push is going to be on for Syria. And you brought that element of the possible false flag chemical attacks. I think it's really important that this stuff gets out there so that they know that we're watching, and we're willing to be vocal about it.
Well, unfortunately, like I said, I think the attitude of the government now is, who cares if they're on to us? We're just going to go through the motions for the benefit of the history books, and we're just going to go on with this war. And unfortunately, from the point of view of the United States government, they have gone way too far into this agenda that Wesley Clark blew the whistle on back in 2005. They can't turn around. If they were to say, all right, we were wrong, we quit, we turn around and go back, the U.S. economy would implode, because the only thing holding it up right now is the expectation that the U.S. government is going to conquer all these resource-rich areas of the world, like Venezuela, and force them to do business with the U.S. Federal Reserve note, taking us back to Bretton Woods. The moment that possibility is gone, you're going to see some seismic upheavals in the U.S. economic, and for that matter, the global economic system here.
Right, exactly. So, I'm amazed that everything seems to focus on these. You talk about the wonder weapons and missiles and all these exotic things and huge nuclear strikes. If any one particular, where the U.S. infrastructure is so vulnerable, the handful of the right people on the ground in the right places could cripple us badly enough that they don't need missiles, nukes, EMPs, or anything like that. We'd be begging for, order and stability just with, having to fend off well-placed special forces, people intent on taking out infrastructure.
Well, by way of showing how fragile that is, and this gets on back to the open borders issue. If there is a nation out there who hates us and really wants to harm us, this open border acceptance of all refugees is a good way to basically get a covert action force of considerable size into the United States of America. Now, I remember many, many years ago, when I was still living in Los Angeles, somebody actually did a study to see how easy it would be to absolutely gridlock the entire Los Angeles area freeway system. And they decided it could be done with fewer than 100 cars. Just go on out to Cal Worthington or any other car lot and buy 100 junker cars and just drive them to certain key transition roads and just leave them. Set them on fire, leave them, and the entire Los Angeles freeway system would grind to a halt. Even the emergency services would not be able to get through. So we are very, very vulnerable. And this open borders thing makes us more vulnerable. And it just doesn't make any sense for the U.S. to be screaming about national security and threats to the United States of America as an excuse to go in and attack these other countries. At the same time, the doors to the interior of our very fragile nation are being left wide open.
Exactly. All right, got to go. The dog alarm's going off. See you later.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and hopefully the dog is not on fire. We're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network, and we're going to go back to the phones to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? Mike, two things. One, I think the country owes an apology to General Flynn, and if Trump had any guts, he would reappoint him as National Security Advisor.
I agree.
Shame. He did exactly what he did exactly what he was supposed to do. He was supposed to open up to Russia and try to get us back in the right footing. And that brings me back to my second point. Before I turned you on, when I got home, I turned on RT on the internet, and they had the parade, the Victory Day Parade.
Okay.
They have every year. The Great Patriotic War. What a military. And, I mean, you could see in those troops how dedicated they are, how much they love their country. And you could see how the people love Putin. They spent $48 billion on their military. We spent over $600 billion on ours. And I think they're every inch the match for our troops. So
I would agree.
you know? And we should just get it through our heads. I mean, you know, why not be friends with them? There's nothing wrong with that country today. I don't know, you know, maybe there was something wrong with the Soviet Union. I mean, I'm not a communist. I don't particularly like communism. And I guess, you know, there were some problems there. Of course, they did defeat the Nazis. There's no question about that. They were the primary, Russia was the primary nation that defeated them. And they took over 20 million people killed in order to accomplish it. But as far as today, they're a decent, democratic, they're mostly Christian nation. As a matter of fact, view themselves as a Christian. What is the problem? I don't understand it.
Let me give you some history.
More than I trust you.
Let me give you some history. When the communist revolution happened, it was immediately seen as a threat to the money junkies in all of the capitalist nations. This idea that the wealth should be socialized across the entire population did not sit well with capitalists who felt that all the money should be flowing into their pocket. And that's why the Soviet Union was so demonized, in order to prevent Americans from even objectively looking at the different... this is getting really kind of weird here. Okay. Call again. There we go. All right. And we're back here again, and I'm sorry about all these interruptions, but something apparently is going on.
I hear you now.
Okay, with our Skype connection. So let me back on up and give you a little bit of history. What's scared the American economic system so much about the Soviet Union was its communist philosophy of socializing the wealth across all the population. And that was seen as a threat to the capitalist money junkies, who think the natural order of the universe is that people should work and all that wealth should go into their pockets. And that was why the Soviet Union was being so demonized, to prevent Americans from even objectively looking at the difference between the two economic systems. And I remember still from when I was in grade school, the social studies textbooks, the propaganda against the Soviet Union was heavy-handed and way over the top, and I even noticed it all the way back then. So that's what was happening back then. Now, you're right. After the fall of the Soviet Union and the Russian republics are more capitalistic, and everybody was all friends and buddy-buddy, but there are two aspects, which is why the United States, actually three aspects, why the United States is back trying to turn Russia into an enemy. The first one is that with the end of the Soviet Union and the Cold War, the American people were saying, well, let's cut spending on the military. We don't need to maintain all of these weapons of horrific mass death. There's no more Soviet Union. It's time for a peace dividend. And so the military-industrial complex has been longing to bring back some form of the Cold War for quite some time. And that's one of the factors. The other factor is that Vladimir Putin, when he took direct control of Russia's central bank, it's still privately owned, but Putin took government control of their private central bank in order to manage the public currency as a public utility, and on that day he went to the top of the private central bankers' special high-interest targets list. And then the third factor is that Russia and China and a lot of other nations that are allied with Russia and China have stopped using the U.S. Federal Reserve note for cross-border trade and banking, and that is a tremendous threat to the Federal Reserve, which has grown very wealthy over forcing other nations to use U.S. dollars for cross-border trade and banking, to either borrow those pieces of ink and paper at interest or to send manufactured goods and agricultural produce to the United States in exchange for ink and paper. And it was a way of the U.S. imposing its imperial tax on the rest of the world following World War II. But that's falling apart. And in terms of the globalists, the New World Order, Russia and China most assuredly do not want to surrender their national sovereignty to a global government. And so before they can bring about the New World Order and the global government, Russia and China have to be destroyed.
Am I still on?
Yes, you're still on.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, I just had a couple of questions on that. One is how evil, or if he was evil at all, do you think Stalin really was? Do you believe the stories about the millions of people that he murdered, or do you think there's something wrong there? The same thing even when Lenin took over and after the Russian Revolution. Do you think there's anything true about the millions of people, the starvation and all that? The other thing I want to ask you about is China. According to Alex Jones, at least, China is part of that New World Order. If they're part of the globalists are using them, he doesn't think Russia is, but I'm wondering what you think about that also.
No, I don't think China's part of the New World Order, and as far as what we know about anybody in history at this point, knowing how history is distorted for political gain, it's hard to say. They may not have been as evil as we are told. Others may not have been as good as we are told. We are just now realizing that the government of the United States of America is also guilty of very horrific actions, such as torturing innocent Iraqis to death to find weapons of mass destruction that don't exist. We've got all these CIA secret torture centers all over the globe. We're finding out our government is itself involved in illicit drug trafficking. And so we are basically as clueless about the true nature of our leaders as the medieval peasants were. But that is rapidly changing because of the Internet and the independent media. Obviously, Stalin made a lot of mistakes. So did Lenin. So did Adolf Hitler. But again, if we rely on the official Orthodox history, we may not really understand what these people were about. It's the same thing every time I talk to somebody about North Korea and they say, oh, that Kim Jong-un, he's a kook, he's a nut, he's all this other stuff. And I say, how do you know? Have you ever met him? No, but I saw it on TV. And I say, you mean the same people who told you Saddam had nuclear weapons and you're going to believe them what they're telling you today? And that usually shuts them up.
But as far as Stalin goes, I mean, even after he died, I mean, even the Russians kind of said that he did some bad things. Khrushchev, for one thing, I think he cut off all information about Stalin at that time. And, I mean, and supposedly he killed his own people. It wasn't that he went to another country and did anything. He actually supposedly killed millions of Russians. I don't know.
He killed the undesirables, the deplorables, whatever. I mean, if you read the works of Solzhenitsyn, that's a very good insight into what was going on. And yes, the Stalin's state security did send a lot of people away to the gulags. I don't know the exact number. But yeah, bad things happened in the former Soviet Union. Bad things happened in Nazi Germany. Bad things are happening in the United States of America. Okay?
All right, I guess that's pretty much it.
Okay.
But he did. I do got to say this.
Oh, come on.
That's going to look like the Germans are going to overrun it. And people at that time seemed to respect it. I don't know.
Okay. I actually didn't hear a lot of what you said because we had to reconnect our line again. I don't know what's going on with Skype, if it's the weather over RBN or if somebody's actually trying to hack on in and break our connection. I understand one of the other RBN hosts was dealing with this same issue the other day. Anyway, we're going to let you go. Thank you very much for the phone call. I'm going to get on back to the news here. And let's talk about the economic news here. We are still seeing very heavy efforts to keep the price of investment metals down, silver and gold. And over at goldcore.com, they're saying that even though silver seems to be declining despite increasing demand, which makes no sense, the fact that it is low, this is a time to buy on in. Because anytime you want to invest in any commodity, you want to buy low and sell high. So the lower they force the silver and gold prices, the more you should consider obtaining some as a means of wealth preservation in advance of the collapse of the euro or the U.S. dollar, both of which could easily happen within the next couple of years. We're going to take a break here for some commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we are hearing that Bitcoin topped $1,700 to set a new all-time high. This is feeling to me like it's a bubble. It feels like it's a run-up, maybe a pump and dump. And I know everybody's in love with the idea of a cryptocurrency, peer-to-peer, no central issuing controlling authority like the Federal Reserve, but that does not necessarily mean the currency is still not subject to manipulation by money junkies. And seeing how rapidly the price is going up now, it makes me very, very nervous. And certainly with the price being at a record high, this doesn't make sense to be buying it now. But apparently a lot of people are thinking this is the way to go, no matter how expensive it is. But I think the Bitcoin bulge, as it were, is going to end badly. Now, despite all the claims by the government and the corporate media that everything is really hunky-dory and unemployment's only 4.4%, the reality is that we are in a time of extreme economic hardship. And as a result, we're seeing what are being called boomerang kids. And these are young adults who have graduated college, cannot find a job, or cannot find a job that allows them to support themselves and pay off those student loans, and they're having to move back in with their parents well into their 30s. And this is a strain, obviously, on the parents, who, being close to retirement age or at retirement age, are on fixed incomes. So there's been a recent study conducted by Fidelity and the Stanford Center on Longevity, and it says the added stress of caring for all these adult children is putting a severe emotional and financial strain on baby boomers, with over 75% saying their kids are cutting into their budgets and over 50% saying they're generally less happy about life. Now, I'm sure they're not having to do parental chores, but still, they don't have their privacy, they don't have their room. But seeing how much this is going on, it's another indicator that the economy is nowhere near as healthy as the government is trying to tell you it is. We're in a wartime economy. That's what's going on. We're in a wartime economy where everything is sucked out of the people and poured into that war machine. Apparently, over in Fort Lauderdale, and this one actually made the corporate media, apparently there is a labor dispute going on, Spirit Airlines, and apparently the labor dispute has resulted in over 300 flights being canceled over the past 7 days. They can't find flight crews. And apparently it broke out into just this brawl among passengers who were just upset at the way they were being treated. There was a YouTube video, or rather a video, smartphone video, and it's posted online showing passengers just confronting airline employees. Broward Sheriff's deputies were trying to keep order. And yes, it's frustrating when you're trying to get someplace and the flight is being canceled, especially if at the other end you're on a time limit. We've been hearing about all these stories where United was kicking passengers off of flights who then missed the sailing of their cruise ship, or they missed this vacation rental that they still had to pay for and were never able to use. It's very, very frustrating. But I think that this entire crowd flashed into violence is a measure of how close the entire population is to just freaking out, losing their temper. We're all trying to hold in our anger, which, by the way, is what leads to depression. But I think the entire country has just reached the breaking point. We've been abused by the government. We're being abused by corporations. We're being abused by the medical industrial complex. We know we're being lied to by the corporate media. People are just fed up. And they don't have a peaceful solution. And all it takes is a small spark to get everybody going. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I just got a very interesting email. Stalin sent my girlfriend's grandparents to Siberia after he confiscated their land and wealth. They were Ukrainian. And yes, that is something Stalin definitely was doing. Do you remember the sort of caricatured spy movies of the 60s and 70s where they always talked about liquidating somebody as a euphemism for killing them. What that was all about was that's what Stalin was doing. And he was talking about liquidating them like a financial term, which was to kill or remove some people and then liquidate their assets in order to pour wealth into the government's budget. And Stalin was hardly the first person to do that. One of the Roman emperors, I think it was Nero, I could be wrong on that, but he literally ordered all of Rome's wealthiest families to write wills, leaving their wealth to himself, the emperor. And then every time the Roman treasury started getting depleted, he would simply have his centurions kill off the family and inherit their wealth and put it into the treasury and so forth and so on. So, a lot of nasty things going on. We are also getting word that North Korea has just announced they are moving forward with their 6th nuclear test. We have way too many hotheads in this circus right now. Want to talk about immigration, globalism, and to start out, somebody sent me a wonderful quote, which I'm going to read to you right now. Quote, "The small states junk, which is still present in Europe today, must be liquidated as soon as possible. It must be the goal of our fight to create a unified Europe," end quote. Well, that sounds like something Jean-Claude Juncker could say, or Angela Merkel, or any of the European Union supporters. But it turns out that's a quote from the diary of Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels, explaining why, once Germany was provoked to war, why they felt they should continue it. So what we have here right now is the same exact plan, a unified Europe, unfolding today that was unfolding back in the 1940s, and it didn't work out all that well. Now, as you know, a lot of people were very disappointed by Marine Le Pen's loss in the French election, but already we are seeing evidence of massive, and I mean truly massive, in-your-face election fraud that is starting to surface. Apparently, an Arab man actually recorded himself stealing all the Le Pen ballots at his polling station in suburban Paris, so nobody could vote for her. And he actually did a selfie video. Look, I'm stealing the ballots. Oh, where we're going on. And then there's an even more alarming article. This is out of One Earth Unite, and they've got photos to back it all up. Remember, we were talking the other day about these spoiled ballots. And what that means, ballots that are damaged and therefore are under French law, not counted. And apparently, they have discovered thousands of torn Marine Le Pen ballots, which are all invalid and disqualified. They're not going to be counted. And they're reporting in this story that French voters received their ballots in a large envelope in the mail. Many of the envelopes contained 2 Macron ballots and no Le Pen ballot, so they couldn't vote for Le Pen. And others contained a perfectly intact Macron ballot and a torn Le Pen ballot, which would be considered invalid. And we, remember, reported earlier in the week that the number of so-called spoiled ballots was larger than the number of votes Marine Le Pen actually received. And if they were all Le Pen ballots and they had been counted, it would have put her over the top. Yes, it is time to bring back those guillotines. And it's just like we saw with the Scottish independence referendum. They're stealing the election, and they don't even seem to care if everybody knows it. Yeah, we're stealing the election. What are you going to do about it? Now, getting on back to the Senate hearings about Russia did this and Russia did that, and Russia's tearing tags off of couch cushions, and Russia's stealing socks from the dryer. Apparently, a cyber official told the Senate earlier today, that the United States was watching while Russians hacked the France computer networks during the election, and that the U.S. warned French officials that it was going on. So, okay, if Russia hacked the election, then maybe Macron didn't win fairly? Propaganda is starting to fight against each other, and that's a good sign. That's a good sign. Now, here's an update on a story that we covered yesterday. Germany takes first step toward legalizing rape committed by Muslim men. This is just ridiculous. And the story is recently a German judge acquitted a Turkish drug dealer, fully understanding that he forcibly and undeniably violated a woman for 4 hours to the point of her incapacitation. And the reason the judge did not convict this Turkish drug dealer for rape was the claim that the perpetrator did not culturally understand what rape is. The judge said that the mentality of the Turkish cultural circle, to the Turk, it's simply wild sex. And the judge said a conviction is not possible because no intention is demonstrable. Well, again, just like the Title 18 stuff, the intent doesn't matter. It's the physical assault on the woman. And more than that, I want to go back to what Teddy Roosevelt said about immigration, where he basically said anybody is welcome to come to our country legally through the proper channels, but once you are here, understand you are in this country. You obey our laws. You understand we have a certain culture and certain beliefs and a language called English. You don't come here and try and make our country what your country was. Because if your country was all that wonderful, why did you come here in the first place? Actually, that's my adding on to what Teddy Roosevelt said. And I find it shocking, although understandable in the light of this New World Order nonsense, where these refugees are going into Europe and they are committing rape on an epic scale, and now we're seeing some of these countries saying, well, they don't understand that rape is bad, therefore we're not going to throw them in prison. Meanwhile, the woman has still been raped. The women have been raped. And if they're not going to arrest and prosecute these refugees under that nation's rape laws, then women better start learning how to use firearms, or at least pepper spray. Story coming out of Daily Caller. It was an invasion how Hungary managed to erase illegal immigration in just a few months. Hungary really just put their foot down. When the first refugees showed on up, it was a mess, just like it is in Sweden and Germany, and refugees said, no, we're not going to do this. They imposed border controls, and yes, their relations with the European Union are under extreme stress. Brussels is now out there ordering all countries to start taking down the internal border controls. You have no right to refuse to let rapists and people with contagious diseases into your country. Part of the New World Order here. Now, the other day I was talking about Stephen Fry. Stephen Fry is a very brilliant comedian. He's done a lot of movie work. He's had his own talk show, game show, in fact. And he's a lot of fun. Claire's a big fan of him. And we were talking about how the Irish government was looking at him to charge him with blasphemy, which I didn't even realize there was a civil law against blasphemy in Ireland, but apparently there is, because he had made a comment on a TV interview about how could he give his worship to a God who allowed such evil and injustice to exist in the world. Oh, blasphemy, blasphemy, burn him at the stake, burn him at the stake. Well, apparently the Irish police have decided to drop the charges because they couldn't find enough people who were outraged by what Stephen Fry said. Apparently most people said, yeah, it's a decent, reasonable question right now in this day and age. If there is a God up there and he's allowing all this stuff to happen, why should we, say hello or give him the time of day? It's ridiculous. Now, over in Chicago, the gun control model for the entire world, apparently the Chicago gangs have really gotten a death grip on the city. And they were able to do that because they came on in, they started small, nobody could fight back, and they've grown and grown and grown to the point where now they are equipped with military-grade weapons with armor-piercing bullets, which were used in a recent ambush on the police. Now, we're not talking about We're not talking about guns that should be banned. These guns are already banned. This kind of ammunition is already banned. Certainly in Chicago, all guns are banned, and we can see how wonderful that has worked out for the city and now for the police force. When you ban guns, you disarm the law-abiding only. What's that old saying was on a bumper sticker? When you outlaw guns, only outlaws will have guns. That's exactly what's happened here. And now the outlaws are taking control of the city. Meanwhile, the gun grabbers are just out there getting sillier and sillier. Over at Edgewood Middle School in Trenton, Ohio, there was a student who has been suspended for 10 days because he liked a photo of an airsoft gun on Instagram. That was it. He saw this photo of an airsoft rifle, and if you don't know what I mean by that, Airsoft is a company that makes very realistic-looking guns, but all they fire are these little plastic pellets driven by air. They're harmless. There was actually some congressperson who tried to claim that you could actually modify an airsoft gun to fire a .223 cartridge, which was met with derision and laughter by everybody who knows how guns actually operate. But this kid saw a picture of an airsoft gun on Instagram, and he hit like, and he was suspended for 10 days. That's how ridiculous it's getting. Remember yesterday we were talking about this high school that actually had a trap shooting competition team. And there was an effort to deny them a page in the yearbook for their trap shooting team because they're holding guns. Oh my goodness, we can't have that in the yearbook. What will future generations think of us if they see guns in the yearbook? Probably the same thing they think of my generation when they see the guns in the yearbook. We sure had them. We didn't have school shootings back when I was a kid. It would have been a singularly stupid thing to do. Now, there's a very popular Second Amendment advocate, Robert Eugene Owens, was one of the most vocal defenders of the Second Amendment. And apparently, over in North Carolina yesterday, supposedly he committed suicide. At least that's what they're saying. He was 46 years old. The police are saying the gunshot wound was self-inflicted. I don't think I'm ready to just accept that at face value. We're coming up in an age where there's going to be a lot of wet work against the independent media. Now, out in California, La La Land again, California is considering ending a ban on communists in government jobs. Now, yeah, this law goes back to the Cold War. And it was a law that basically said anybody who was a member of an organization that advocated for overthrowing the government was denied a job in the California government. But now California is saying communists are okay. And they're going to let them have government jobs right alongside the illegal immigrants. Amazing. Here's another story. Roosevelt High School over in Colorado. The Spanish teacher had a Cinco de Mayo celebration, and the piñata was in the shape of Donald Trump. And apparently the kids beat it up, and they got the candy that was inside, and they shared pictures and video of the piñata on social media. And, of course, the parents and the public responded immediately how inappropriate this was in a public school. And it certainly was. The teacher apparently is, they're now investigating the case, saying it was an incredibly disrespectful act. It does not reflect the values of Roosevelt High School or the school district, blah, 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 blah. Now, whether or not you like Donald Trump, and I'll be the first to say that I am tremendously disappointed in his reversal on key issues, especially regarding war. He is the president. And it's time to just accept that and work within that paradigm. And beating up piñatas on him and putting his face on dartboards or whatever else is you're doing is not going to actually provide a real-world solution. If you want to do that sort of thing, you do it in your own home. But you do not do it in a public school as a teacher. When I was over at UH Manoa teaching computer animation, which I really enjoyed, I never talked about politics. Even the few people who knew who I was, when they saw me on the campus and they wanted to talk, and I said, no. There's a line between what I do in my private life and my personal beliefs and feelings. I'm here to teach computer animation and visual effects, and that's what we're going to talk about. And you, of course, First Amendment, you can talk about politics all you want among yourselves. But I have an obligation as an instructor. Actually, I was an adjunct professor. I'm here to teach you these subjects, and this is all I'm going to be teaching, because that's the rules. That's my rules. Keep clear lines between these things, and unfortunately we're seeing way too many teachers who think that the classroom is now an extension of their own personal universe, in which they can bring in their own personal opinions and biases. And I do not think that is fair to the students, because the students ought to be given the chance to grow up and learn and educate without imposed biases so they can make their own choices later in life. That's what I think. But heck, they don't listen to me anyway. We're going to take a break for commercials and be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Breaking news, Donald Trump has just fired FBI Director James Comey. He's fired, you're fired, you're fired, you're out of here. And boy, finally, we're starting to see the Donald Trump we were promised during the campaign. So, yeah. And apparently Sessions recommended the dismissal, and Donald Trump said yes. So, all right. That's a good thing. That's a good thing out there. Hit the road, James, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, James, don't you come back no more. All righty, getting on back to the news. Apparently over in Great Britain, they have been experimenting with literally a pre-crime program. It was all hush-hush, but apparently somebody blew the whistle on that, and it's right out of Minority Report. The idea, first of all, Great Britain has a reputation for having the most surveillance on their people of any other country. TV cameras everywhere, listening to all the phones, and enforcing backdoors to all encryption. And basically the theory is they're going to put all this information into a computer that is going to predict when somebody is going to commit a crime. Which certainly makes a lot more sense than psychics in the movie, but there's still the possibility of error. What happens if they're running this crime prediction software on Windows 10? They could send innocent people to jail. But I mean, we are getting into that dystopian society that so many science fiction writers warned us were coming. 1984, Brave New World, THX 1138. Amazing. Now, apparently, over in Blacklisted News, they're running this story about the big fight going on over at Hennepin County Sheriff's Office that is resisting a Freedom of Information Act request regarding their facial recognition cameras. Because it turns out that the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office has been using facial recognition systems since 2013. And the public didn't know about it. Now, the concern here is that these facial recognition systems are still not very reliable. The first time they tried one out in an airport was down in Florida, and it generated thousands of false positives and not one real genuine ID. So we're once again seeing a technology that is not proven to actually work being marketed and sold and put on out into the society in a position where it could cause great harm. Where you could be walking along, for example, the jetway at the airport, and all of a sudden the police grab you because the facial recognition system says that you're somebody that you're not. And you miss your flight, you miss the job interview, you don't get the job, all kinds of terrible things can happen. It's not a reliable, accurate technology, and it should not be used. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And I got to tell you, the firing of James Comey has really improved my attitude today. I don't know if it comes across on the BAM user camera, but boy, oh boy. Yes, finally. Finally. Maybe this is the beginning of a trend of Trump reasserting his control over the administration. Let's just hope it's not a flash in the pan. This should be the beginning. Yes. It's going to be the Trump White House, not the neocon White House. Alrighty, getting on back here. Microsoft has issued an emergency fix. They're ahead of their normal monthly, here's a whole bunch of patches for you. The patch is to stop hackers from taking control of computers with a single email. And the bug in Microsoft anti-malware software such as Windows Defender could be exploited without the recipient even opening the message. Now, the fix has been pushed out hours before the usual Tuesday security update. Alrighty, let's see. We're going to take a phone call. Rich in Virginia Beach, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hello, Mike. Glad to talk to you. I've never called your show before, but I did want to explain one quick item.
Yes?
I am from the, well, actually, I'm retired military, and I work in the military defense complex, as you put it. And I kind of wanted to explain why it is so expensive to have military work done. The actual military contracts that the contracts that the military puts out for civilian companies to bid on are so expensive and so technical that it takes so many people to make those contracts work and to jump through all the hoops that they put in front of us that it just takes an exorbitant amount of people for them to fulfill the contract.
Okay.
So I kind of want to say that really the military industrial complex kind of does it to themselves. It isn't that the contractors that are looking to do the work are actually providing anything, that somebody else couldn't. It's just the requirements are so high and the contractual obligations are so high to meet those contracts that it just takes so many people to do it.
Well, there's no question that the military-industrial complex makes more money the more complex things are. Most of these contracts, as I understand it these days, are bid cost plus. So the more the contract costs, the more profit there is to be made. But again, we see other countries producing very capable weapons at much lower cost and complexity. And I don't know if you were listening to the show yesterday. We were talking about this amazing graduate student, just one guy, who wrote an AI air combat fighting system that ran on a $35 Raspberry Pi computer, and it beat Air Force fighter pilots and Air Force AIs in air combat simulation. So obviously there is a way to get our weapons procured to get better weapons at lower cost, but we don't seem to really be looking for that.
Yes, sir. I certainly understand that. And there's another one, they have the firm fixed price and they have the cost plus price. And those are the two modes of operation that the contracts go out on. And, of course, various companies bid on each one of them. The firm fixed price, there are so many loopholes and things that can happen within those. And honestly, to be honest, there are very incompetent people overlooking those programs. And I've been one of the people that used to educate the government on this as a contractor. And it's just unbelievable the amount of incompetence that is within the government on the oversight side of these contracts.
Yes.
That's one of the reasons it's really, really high.
Well, it may be incompetence, and it may just be looking the other way, because we know that there is the military contractors are very generous donors to members of Congress, so that's basically, you don't bite the hand that's feeding your campaign. It is a problem, and again, Eisenhower did warn us. He saw the beginnings of this whole military-industrial complex, and he tried to warn us all in his farewell address. And I mean, we're at a state right now where more than half of every tax dollar goes to the military in one way or the other, and nobody's really sure just how much that is, because some of it is overt, like the budget for the wars, the budget for the Defense Department in general, the budget for the VA, and then there are the black project budgets, which are hidden inside the budgets of other departments, like the Department of Agriculture. So we, the American people, don't actually know what the real spending on the military is, except that it's continually going up. And we've all heard these stories about, a hammer costing, $80, $90 by the time it gets to the front lines with all the military procurement. There are ways to do it better. China does it more cost effectively. Russia does it more cost effectively. The illustration with this Raspberry Pi tells us that the high-tech weaponry can be had by scaling down. And certainly one of the areas where this is most known is in software development, because the more people you have working on a software project, the slower it actually goes. And keeping things simple, elegant, and under the control of just a few people who can comprehend what's going on, you can get some very efficient software. The way software is engineered now for the military, look at all the problems they're having with the F-35. Where they're even saying the software for the cannon won't be available until 2019. The software for the helmet still cannot properly sort out and fuse the camera views for the transparent fuselage concept. And the networked radar systems are still getting confused over how many and where the targets actually are. And the software is just gargantuan, and it's impossible to manage. And I think that's an area where if the Defense Department really wants to start dealing with some of these issues, they need to start thinking about smaller is actually going to be better in this area and in this regard. Anyway, listen, Rich, thanks an awful lot for the call. Thanks an awful lot for your service to our country. We're going to let you go here, and we're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining the network. And if you have not heard the news yet, Donald Trump just fired FBI Director James Comey. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. And we're going to go back to the phones. Joe in Idaho. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello. I'm calling. I'm kind of glad to see Comey getting fired myself.
Me
I'm
too.
hoping that someone gets installed who will actually investigate all this nonsense about the Russians hacking the American elections and the French elections and other things such as that. But I don't know whether that's going to take place or not. But the topic I'm calling about is because I lived in Ukraine for a while. I have two children that were born there. I was married there. I rebuilt a Soviet apartment. I went to a university there, so I was there. And then ended up with a family. But so I have paid attention to Russia. I speak Russian, fluent Russian, and I have paid very close attention to what's going on. I have heard quite a bit of talk about how Turkey is kind of turning its back on the U.S. and that they're a member of NATO, and there's a lot of bad talk about Erdogan, president of Turkey, that he's a terrible dictator and things such as that. But when we go back and look at what has happened, there was a coup several months ago, or an attempted coup of Mr. Erdogan. He was at a hot spring at the time. He was taking a hot bath. 2 weeks before this, he had apologized to the Russians for shooting down a Russian jet that was flying to Syria, which the Russians had been invited into Syria by President Assad. And he had apologized. He said that the CIA gave him the coordinates on the jet that flew over Turkey for 17 seconds on its way to Syria, and it was shot down. And he wanted to apologize for the death of the pilot and the shooting down. I think he was trying to make amends to Russia and started realizing that the CIA was not his friend, possibly not NATO. Russia had a deal to put a pipeline through Turkey, an oil pipeline, and also Turkey is a primary tourist destination for Russians. When they shot down this jet, they stopped the contract for the pipeline and stopped all tourism going to Turkey. So it really hurt Turkey's economy in a way. But while Erdogan was at this hot bath, President Putin called him and warned him and said, there's an attempted coup, they're coming after you, you need to get out of there. That's how come Erdogan survived, is because Putin warned him. Erdogan then blamed the CIA. He definitely blamed the CIA and thought that the United States was trying to take over. When you look at what's actually happening on the ground concerning Russia and that region over there, in 1997 there was a treaty between NATO and the United States and Russia, in which NATO and the United States agreed that they would not move any military hardware any closer towards Russia's borders.
Yes.
It was a treaty. It was a binding treaty. And yet they have encroached and encroached and encroached until they have carried out a coup of President Yanukovych 2 different times. Once in 2004, it was called the Orange Revolution, and then again in 2014. Yanukovych was elected democratically both times and ousted by these wannabe Polish guys in western Ukraine who are literally Nazis.
Well, wait a minute. Yanukovych was ousted in a U.S.-sponsored coup d'etat. George Soros was in there with his NGOs and the CIA, and the reason they wanted Yanukovych out was because he was starting to make nice with Russia. He was rebuffing invitations to merge with the European Union, and they wanted Yanukovych out, and they wanted Poroshenko in because Poroshenko would obediently bring Ukraine into the European Union, which was one of the major reasons Crimea then seceded. So part of the reason the world is in such confusion and turmoil is the U.S. government has this really bad habit of going into other people's countries and mucking about with their governments. It's a bad habit, and it really needs to stop.
Regime change.
Yeah, regime change.
So when you look at it, I think what I really think, and that I don't think that other people have mentioned, that's why I'm calling, is that Turkey is an object for the United States, as is Ukraine. They've kind of left Belarus alone because the president wouldn't go along with it there. They have military hardware in Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania. They're literally surrounding Russia.
Yes.
I think the ultimate goal is regime change in Russia and the vast amount of resources in Russia. If they could take Russia down, they have their whole world, basically, and they're hoping to buy China off. Now, when you look at Ukraine, Ukraine was the very first Russia. Ukraina is how it's pronounced in Russian. That means Ukrai means at our land, at our border. This is our place. The first Russia was about 850, 842 AD, and it was called Kiev Rus.
Yes.
It was actually in Kiev, Ukraine. It's pronounced Kiev, not Kiev. But this is where Russia was. They had their great patriotic war against the Ottoman Empire on Crimea and in Odessa and all that northern Black Sea area. The people in Crimea are all Russian. I never met anyone that wasn't Russian in Crimea. So when Yanukovych was ousted and Poroshenko was put in, they rebelled the same as the eastern all-ethnic Russian part of Ukraine that's now a very hot spot, and people dying there daily almost still.
Yes.
So the United States has been squawking about these people changing elections and stuff while they literally are taking over one country right after the next, whether it's through a coup over Erdogan or whether it's ousting the Yanukovych 2 times in Ukraine. This is what's going on, and I'm hoping that Trump puts somebody in there in the FBI that will look at these hacks and find out the definite people who are doing it, because they're pointing at Russia, and we're almost certain that it's not. There's more evidence that there's not than it is.
Well, we know in the case of the DNC emails, it wasn't a hack anyway. It was a leak, most likely by Seth Rich. Julian Assange even implied it with Seth Rich, who paid for the leak with his life. Anyway, listen, Joe, you are a font of great historical information, and I'd love to give you the rest of the show, but I can't. We need to get back to some other things here. But thanks. Yeah. Very good information. And thanks again, and call in again.
Appreciate your show.
Well, thank you very much. That was a good phone call. We're going to let you go, though, and go to Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha to you both.
Aloha.
Indeed. You know something, when talking about that student in Trenton, Ohio that was suspended because he happened to like a photo of an airsoft gun, which I went and actually looked up an article about that when it first happened, and the fact that it occurred around 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening when he was at home. You know something, when they reported that deal, they actually blew the lid off the facts. And for people that are still disbelieved that the alphabet soup groups do not monitor what you're doing at home, guess what? Otherwise,
I didn't get that part of the story. I didn't realize that this kid had liked the photo on Instagram in his home. The article that I got so they were spying on the kid in his home. He likes an Instagram photo of an airsoft rifle, and they suspend him for 10 days. Boy, what kind of an education are they giving our children to treat them like that? They're trying to condition them to accept total surveillance and total dictatorship.
Well, that's just it, though. They're doing it blatantly in your face, but the problem is a lot of people don't even realize that or even think about it. But the thing is that it's obvious that the alphabet soup groups are doing this because how else would the supervisors or the school administrators know about what this kid was doing at 7 or 8 o'clock at night in his own home to start with, unless they were informed by the alphabet soup groups to start with about what was going on. The fact that they don't actually blatantly...
Okay, they don't need to go... They don't need to go through the alphabet soup agencies. Remember, there was that big stink about this school that had school-issued laptops they gave to the students, and the laptops had built-in cameras, and it turned out there was software on the laptops that allowed school administrators and teachers to access those webcams while the laptops were in the kids' rooms at home.
That's true, too.
Yeah, and
we don't know that this...
Okay.
We don't know that this young man actually had one of those.
No, well, no, what I'm saying is that the schools have access to software to directly spy on students without going through the alphabet agencies.
Well, there's that too.
Yes.
But I think it's pretty blatantly in your face that when you think. I mean, when I first heard the story about it, because I had to look it up back to when it was like just 24 hours after it was reported about what happened. I went back that far as news stories go about what occurred, and I'm like, wait a minute, this happened at this hour of the night, and yet the next day he's called into the office. Like, whoa, wait a minute, what's wrong with this picture? And so, because when I first heard about it to start with, I'm thinking, well, how in the world does the school administrator or people in the office know about what this kid did the night before? How would they have known about that? Because one, I mean, if he had done this on the school grounds, I can sort of see their point.
I don't.
At the same time, when this was I know.
Well, look, we're coming up on a commercial break. Let me finish what I want to say here. Okay, first of all, I think the school overreacted the fact that he liked a photo of a gun in the first place. Second, just as I did not bring my politics onto the campus when I taught computer animation, I don't think the school administration has any say over the children once they leave the campus and go home. For the schools to continue to say that they have the authority to spy on children and chastise them for incorrect behavior, that's way, way over the top. If I were fortunate enough to have a child and they were in a school that treated them like that, I'd pull them out and I'd homeschool. I absolutely would. Anyway, listen, Francis, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And the corporate media is still going agog over the fact that Donald Trump has fired FBI Director James Comey. I'm getting a flood of email, the tone of which is always, it's about time. And I'm in agreement. Finally actually seeing some decisive action from Donald Trump. And this is a good thing. And we're already getting reactions from the other deep staters. They're in a panic out there. Lindsey Graham is out there saying, I can prove that Trump and Russia are working together. We're going to. And I can imagine over wherever Hillary Clinton is hanging out, the ashtrays are bouncing off the walls already. And I imagine Huma Abedin is getting really, really depressed right about now. Because without James Comey to protect them, and very clearly Sessions is not on board with this protection. We could actually see some real investigations moving forward. So we're going to see who Trump is going to nominate to be the new head of the FBI. And I imagine there's going to be a lot of opposition in Congress. They don't want a director of the FBI who's actually going to go out and do investigations. It's the last thing they want. All they want are the congressional investigations, which are basically theater pieces. To say, well, the blame spreads everywhere, so nobody gets to go to jail. I hope Trump gets a real hard-nosed investigator in there, not another political cover-up artist. So, it's a good thing. Overall, it's a good thing. Now, getting on back to computers. Burger King pulled a really interesting marketing stunt last month. They had a TV commercial, 15-second, that was it. And in the commercial, a voice says, an actor says, okay, Google, tell us about the Whopper. And then the Google Home units in the viewers' rooms activated and started talking all about the Whopper burger for far longer than the 15 seconds that Burger King had paid for the actual ad. And, of course, it would just keep on going about how wonderful the Whopper was until somebody says, okay, Google, stop. Now, Google and Wikipedia are trying to make fixes to prevent this thing from happening. I think it's an uphill battle. And it's certainly one of the reasons I would not have one of those devices in my home to begin with. But this idea that you have something that's voice activated near the TV or radio, and somebody on the radio can say, okay, Google, tell us about Michael Rivero. I can hear the machines clicking already. Doesn't matter what technology is invented, somebody's going to turn it to make a fast buck or kill people with it. Now then, over at Spotify. And Spotify is most often credited as the music service most in tune with the pirate mentality, having converted millions of former file shares in recent years. Interestingly, a decade ago, the site actually populated its beta with pirate MP3s, including some that were only available on the Pirate Bay. It's kind of a little murky copyright thing there. I'll tell you, as somebody who worked for most of his life in the entertainment industry, I think the entertainment industry as a whole would be better served by sort of pulling back on the nitpicking issues of intellectual property and devote the effort into actually making new product that we're all going to want to watch. Because I think one of the reasons the cable TV industry is in such trouble, so many people are canceling their subscriptions, it's the same stuff over and over and over and over again. Hardly anything new coming along. And that's why people are shutting off their cable subscriptions. We've already seen this show 20 times. Why are we paying to have it come into the home again? There is a need for new content. And the industry's too busy making sure they're getting every penny for what went out before. Most of which, in my opinion, isn't worth the trouble to pirate in the first place. Now, getting on to medicine. Oh, got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And you know who I would like to see as head of the FBI? Trey Gowdy. That's who I want to see as head of the FBI. This guy will go after these high and mighty criminals who thought they were above the law. I think we all ought to get on over to the White House comment line or email the White House and just say, Trey Gowdy. Put that on out there. I think he would be a great FBI director. He would strike fear into the heart of all these corrupted politicians. Apparently, Susan Rice is having a very negative reaction to the news. Apparently, it took everybody by surprise. Sessions and Trump kept this close to the chest. And it took everybody by surprise. It took me by surprise. I wasn't expecting it. Boy, oh boy. So now all the members of Congress are standing up. They're going to have their statements about why they agree or disagree. Well, Director Comey was doing a wonderful job protecting us from being tarred and feathered by the American people. How dare you remove him? Okay, getting on back to the health and science news. CBS actually ran a report about vaccine-injured people being denied benefits. Yesterday we were talking about this revelation that the law that indemnifies vaccine manufacturers from civil litigation resulting from harm from their products actually only applies to children. And adult vaccines are not covered by that law. And as a result, we're seeing Merck is being hit with multiple class action lawsuits over their shingles vaccine, which you've seen advertised all over the place, because people who are getting that vaccine, they're getting adverse effects. It is triggering shingles in some people. One person lost the eyesight in one eye. There's been at least one death. And Merck is not protected by that indemnification law that says you all have to go to the vaccine court. So everybody's lining on up. But apparently we're seeing this story now where vaccine-injured veterans are being denied benefits. I think everybody understands that when the facade comes down and everybody realizes how much harm has been caused by the vaccines, the pharmaceutical industries are going to be sued out of existence. And everybody's trying to find one way or another that they can protect the money. We must protect the money. Who cares about people? We've got to protect the money. It's a big pile of money. We must worship it. We must protect it. Another story from Natural News about yet another young girl was given the HPV vaccine. She's been left wheelchair bound, feeling like an 80-year-old. And she's having to be homeschooled. It's been 18 months since she had the shot. She can't stand up without getting faint. Can't leave the house without a wheelchair. This is what's going on. Now then, little news about Merck that most people don't know. One of the former presidents of Merck, George W. Merck, during World War II, actually developed biological weapons in the Merck laboratories for the United States government. Maybe he thought it was his patriotic duty. Maybe there was just a lot of money in it. It certainly shows a lack of, shall we say, humanity to be involved in that kind of stuff. Now then, you've probably been hearing on all kinds of independent media. I haven't even seen it yet all that much on the corporate media. It's just been a quick mention. But apparently there's been a mishap at the Hanford nuclear waste site in the Pacific Northwest. Apparently a tunnel has collapsed at the nuclear plutonium extraction plant. A shelter-in-place order has gone out for all the people working at Hanford and even for some of the people just downstream from it. And as of last report, the airspace over Hanford is now a no-fly zone. Airlines are scrambling to reroute flights. Apparently there has been a huge release of radiation into the area, and if any of our listeners are living near Hanford, and if you are, I'm sorry, And if you have a radiation meter, please turn it on and let us know what results you're getting. But they've declared a no-fly zone, and it's just a mess. And it is a reminder that all of these facilities to store and process nuclear waste are not designed to last for very long. Partly because the radioactive waste itself is highly corrosive, and the neutron flux actually breaks down the material. It's like material fatigue from stress, only it's from neutrons, which is why this next story ought to be raising hairs on the back of your neck. Now, as you know, over at Fukushima, they've got a major problem. They've been pouring cooling water into this, the ruins of these reactors, trying to keep them from getting any warmer than they already are. We know there's spontaneous fission going on down there. They don't know how long it's going to go on. And the plants to process the water and make it safe again keep failing. They're not keeping up. And if you look at Fukushima through Google Earth, you will see it is surrounded by all these storage tanks. Just miles and miles of storage tanks with this heavily contaminated wastewater. And so Japan has announced they finally have a solution. The ice wall failed. The water treatment plant failed. They've got a new solution. They're going to build these giant tanks to hold the Fukushima nuclear waste, and they're just going to drop it in the ocean. Problem solved, at least until somebody else is in authority. That is utterly ridiculous. Salt water is highly corrosive. So is the nuclear waste. I don't think it's possible to design a tank that will hold that nuclear waste for its expected lifespan of radioactivity, which in some cases, some of these isotopes is billions of years. They just love to dump things in the ocean because out of sight, out of mind. At the end of World War II, they dumped a lot of surplus weapons, including chemical weapons, into the oceans around Hawaii. And if you have a maritime chart, you know, a professional one, not just a little tourist map, but a professional maritime chart, it's clearly marked out. Don't fish here. Don't have trawling nets here. Probably shouldn't dive here. This is where we left the really icky stuff. And every once in a while, these cases are going to rupture, and the stuff will just flow out into the ocean. Maybe that is the explanation for all the sudden fish die-off off the coast of California. Maybe some of these abandoned chemical munitions that were dumped at the end of World War II, the casings are rupturing. Nobody's testing for it. But it really is, they've made a heck of a mess here. And again, another reminder, you should never let the money junkies make the safety decisions because they're always going to shortchange them. And the illustration of that with regard to Fukushima is the power station at Onagawa. Because the engineer in charge of constructing that plant would not back down on the safety requirements. All the other plants, the engineers were browbeaten down by the money junkies. We need to save money, make this a little smaller. We don't need this, we don't need that. And the engineer at Onagawa made a lot of enemies, but he stood firm. And it's a shame he did not live to see the vindication of his decision, because Onagawa was the only nuclear power station along that coastline that didn't suffer damage during the quake and tsunami. It was possible to build those power stations to not suffer this effect during a quake and tsunami. And most of the power stations, they cut corners to save money. Well, you know, the stockholders want more profit and the executives want more bonuses, so it's a good decision for us to all. Now, on to the subject of human-caused global warming. And apparently, over in Canton, New York, yes, it is snowing. It is still snowing. We are on May 9th. It is still snowing. Over in Colorado, they had an horrific hailstorm. Roads looked like they were covered in snow due to the amount of hail that fell yesterday afternoon. Travel delays. It's just amazing. All this. Remember back in 2000, snowfalls are now a thing of the past. Wrong. Now, EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt is today reaffirming in an interview on CNBC. He is not a believer in catastrophic man-made global warming, and they are starting to purge the Carbonazi scientific observers at both the EPA and the Department of the Interior. They're getting these Carbonazis and fanatics out, and they're going to get some real scientists in who are not bought and paid for by Al Gore. Now, of course, Al Gore's got his new movie, The Inconvenient Sequel, coming on out in July. It's making the rounds of the various film festivals, and the obedient reviewers are saying it's amazing, it's fantastic, it's incredible, you must see this. And I'm predicting it is going to be a box office bomb. Because everybody knows what an absolute fraud the first film was. Nobody's going to go back and see Chapter 2 of More Lies, especially with the memory of a lingering winter and several record-setting winters in our memories. We're tired of being lied to. We're certainly not going to buy a ticket to be lied to some more. Now, surprisingly, over at the George Soros-funded Columbia Journalism Review, they are reporting on the number of scientists who are stepping forward to say that the media attempt to blame hurricanes on man-made climate change is not accurate. And they are absolutely correct, because heat is not what causes a major storm. It is a temperature differential between the air and the ground that causes severe storms. And you can get a major hurricane as much by upper atmospheric cooling as you can by warming the ground. And the proof of that is on the outer gas giant planets of our solar system, which have hurricane-like storms bigger than our entire planet at temperatures hundreds of degrees below zero. So yeah, the media they were fear-mongering. Oh, human-caused global warming, that's why we're getting tornadoes and hurricanes. It's all your fault. If you weren't burning up carbon, there'd be no more hurricanes, which is ridiculous. We know that Earth has always had hurricanes. But it's just non-stop bovine excrement. Now, I'm a dog lover. You probably are aware of that. I love big dogs, big fluffy dogs, roll around on the ground dogs. D-A-W-G, dog. So I was a little upset in this story in the Washington Times, where apparently the Department of Veterans Affairs is conducting taxpayer-funded experiments in which dogs are killed to study the effects of methamphetamine and antidepressants on their brains. And 9 Democratic lawmakers are out there saying, is this really necessary to be doing this? Said apparently Representative Dina Titus of Nevada and 8 Los Angeles area lawmakers said the details of these experiments are alarming. It certainly accounts to animal cruelty. Another story coming out of Natural News, almost all medical studies are bogus. The rate of reproducibility is approaching 0. And if you've ever wanted to read large collections of fake news, look no further than medical science journals, because the articles that are being published in them, usually to support the sales of a given product, are fraudulent. Richard Harris, who works for NPR, says the result is billions of dollars in fraud, waste, and unnecessary expenditures on big pharma drugs that just do not work, and in some cases can be harmful. Our science in this country has become politicized. It's no longer scientific. It's just another sales tool. And we've abandoned scientific method, and that is a mistake to do, because scientific method exists because of the recognition that an individual scientist is just as easy to corrupt as an individual politician or clergy or anybody else. If you offer them enough money, yeah, they'll write the science report and say, see, I'm a scientist. I got a white coat and a clipboard. Just accept what I say without argument. And the whole system has become corrupted by politics and money junkiism. And that is another reason why I am very upset that our schools are not really teaching science and scientific method to students. They're certainly indoctrinating them with the politicized science, human cause, global warming, blah, 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 blah. But they're not teaching kids how to think, how to analyze, how to check and verify for themselves. And the principle of reproducibility is the bedrock of the scientific method. If I conduct an experiment and I get this result, I should be able to tell you what materials I used, the procedure I used, and you should be able to generate the same result. If you can't, there's a problem. And we're seeing all these so-called medical studies that support big pharma drugs. They can't be reproduced. That's a problem. Remember when the ClimateGate scandal broke and researchers went to Hadley CRU and said, well, the solution is easy. Just give us the raw data and how you analyzed it. Let us reproduce your result that says there's a hockey stick human warming. And Hadley CRU said, no, we erased the raw data. We didn't have enough room on our computer. Didn't have the money to buy an extra little shirt pocket terabyte drive. Just take our word for it. We've got all these pretty expensive charts that we did. And that was the warning right there, that human-caused global warming isn't science, it's politics. Anybody who claims to be a scientist who says the raw data is no longer available or I can't share with you the steps to reproduce my results, they're a con artist, white jacket and all. And it's leading to a nation in which we actually have a flood of ineffective and potentially harmful pharmaceuticals being marketed to us on TV in the name of a fast buck. That's a very dangerous situation. Apparently Johnson & Johnson lost their talc cancer case to the tune of $110 million. And again, products put into the market without really knowing. Causes cancer. We'll be right back with the last segment of our show today. Aloha America, welcome back to the show here, and getting on back to the firing of FBI Director James Comey. More and more articles are coming on out, and everybody has a different reason for why the firing took place. Some of them highly speculative, some of them really don't make any sense. Certainly, whatever the cause right now, it's the end of a long trail of abuses by James Comey, and I think Trump just got fed up. But apparently the recommendation to fire him was from both Attorney General Sessions and the Deputy Attorney General, and Trump said, absolutely, let's go forward with it. It caught a lot of people by surprise. And individuals within our system who thought they were being protected by Comey, they're all out there on the warpath. Trump is Nixon, Trump is Hitler, Russia, Russia, Russia. In fact, one person even sent me an email saying Trump's firing of James Comey proves he's working for Vladimir Putin because Putin was terrified that James Comey was going to find evidence, blah, 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 blah. So everybody's in thrash mode. They haven't strategized their conformity yet, which means coordinate the lies. But definitely has kicked over an anthill. And I imagine things are going to get very, very interesting as everybody tries to reposition. I certainly hope Trump puts Trey Gowdy in as head of the FBI, and we stop messing around with all this political compromise situation. Or if not Trey Gowdy, let's get somebody from outside who's a known law enforcement expert who has not been compromised by being inside the Beltway. So I think we'll learn a lot about what's really going on when we see who it is Trump nominates to be the new head of the FBI and just how hard Congress fights against the confirmation. So it will be interesting to see. These are going to be interesting times indeed. In one of the articles, this was actually at the Daily Mail. They're saying that Comey was fired for saying that Huma Abedin had sent hundreds of thousands of emails to Anthony Weiner's laptop. He was exaggerating, yes, but there's no question that the emails were being sent. And now, of course, Huma Abedin is coming on back and saying, well, no, Comey was lying about that as well. I still don't know how they got on the laptop. So everybody's scrambling to cover up. This is good. This is good. Just a whack to the side of that swamp and everything's starting to squirm. And that will be very, very interesting. Apparently, there has been a laboratory study of common food that is finding glyphosate, a known carcinogen, probable carcinogen, in a lot of common foods like original Cheerios, Honey Nut Cheerios, Wheaties, Trix. It's amazing. This stuff is just everywhere, and it is very, very harmful. So what is the FDA going to do about it? They're going to spend $3 million of your money to propagandize you that GMO foods are good for you. Really? Honest, we wouldn't lie to you. We're the government. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Claire and I are going to go on out. We're going to celebrate the firing of James Comey. Also her birthday. And we'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay informed, stay skeptical, take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know, and we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.